Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is a Red Pill Podcast 238, and I'm really looking forward to recapping this week in the markets with you all here today, as it's been a full week since the epic liquidation ritual that happened on October 10th, already securing its place in the history books for crypto. And now that we've made it through this week with Bitcoin showing weakness into this past Friday, October 17th, as the traditional markets were closing off their weekly candles, this puts us in make or break territory, meaning anyone who's looking at the charts right now has a polarizing opinion. And to be honest, I can't blame them, because on one hand, we have precious metals, specifically gold, in euphoria, but then on the other hand, you have crypto altcoins in panic, anger, and depression, with the sentiment now in extreme greed as of yesterday and fear into today. And it's during these extremes where making decisions becomes the most difficult. So what ends up being the decision that most retail investors make during times like these, well, they leave the space that's uncomfortable to go to the space that's seemingly more comfortable. And I believe that's evident when you're hearing the stories and perhaps even seeing the videos with your own eyes of people lining up for hours to buy gold. The crypto space is obviously too uncomfortable for most people, and for a very long time, gold was too boring for most people. But just like when most people start FOMOing into stocks or crypto, it's 95% of the time a top signal. Well, that's what we're likely seeing right now in gold. And this is why I titled my last written update post, The Great Rotation or The Great Depression. And if you've been around this crypto space since at least before the last cycle really kicked off in Q4 of 2020, after that V-shaped recovery from the C19 crash earlier that year, then perhaps you might remember the way that gold was trading back in 2020. And we can't deny the similarities between the way the entire market has crashed this year from what I'm calling World War tariff compared to the way that it crashed at the start of C19 back in 2020, and how both of those crashes followed with a V-shaped recovery, and then shortly after the recovery we hit new all-time highs. It has been a nearly perfect repeat, with the bullish vibes before the crash, then the crash itself, then the V-shaped recovery, then the new all-time highs. And all the while, every investor around the world was focused solely on Donald Trump and Jerome Powell. Here in 2025, same in 2020. So to quickly drop an absolute gem on you at the very beginning of today's podcast, perhaps some of you remember my Year of the Snake Decoded, which was essentially a follow-up to my earlier release, The Black Moon Decoded, which was released on November 1st, about 4 days before that election. I actually picked Trump to win that election based on my decode, and I put emphasis on my theory that the way Trump's last presidency ended would be a mirror of how it would start again for his second term. Meaning that if his last year as president would have a market crash in March and the C19 narrative to blame, that this year in 2025 we would have a market crash in March and a narrative to go along for the ride. Well, we crashed into April and they gave us the tariff narrative. I'd say that's close enough, especially considering the lows of the crash were in by April 7th. I'd imagine you all agree within an 8-day accuracy is pretty spot on, especially for a theory that I built around a presidential candidate that hadn't even won the election yet. So it's not to say I told you so or being right. It's none of that. Just wanted to bring that up because it seems that based on the market structure we're seeing here today, that we're literally mimicking 2020, with some nuances, of course. And if we go back to Trump's first term, as many of you are aware, he was inaugurated on January 20th, 2017. And that term also had tariff talk, and the market also had a major correction, specifically the crypto market, had a major correction in March that year, specifically late March, just like we had a late March correction this year that bled into April. Same. And in late 2017, in the month of October, altcoins also looked very sketchy back then too. Remember, we're here in October right now. So this is what we'll be focusing on here in today's podcast. I'm going to keep it very stoic, very neutral, as I love to do, especially during these very polarizing times. I hope you all appreciate that. I completely understand right now that there's a lot of drama going on in the world, and I just want to do my best to be Chief Wolf, continue to stay focused, keep my eye on the prize. And I'm not here to say that I'm right. I'm not gonna, dance around all this stuff and try to just continue in my own bias, even though I do have my own investment thesis. I have my own wealth plan. I have my own goals, my own targets, etc. And I'll continue to share vulnerably and as best I can to be clear with you all along the way, trust me. But it definitely gets difficult during times like this because this is when people start relying on other people's opinions the most, especially those that are quote unquote experts in analyzing these markets or just their takes on the markets in general. So I know that I hold that presence, that posture. I will do my best today during this podcast to just be as neutral as possible whilst delivering this information. And please just remember what we're working with here. The fact that we have gold in euphoria, we have silver breaking out. It is getting euphoric over there. It's like a 45-year resistance that it just broke out of. You have to understand we're in extremes right now. And behind the scenes, I'm hearing from a lot of people, real estate agents and people in the tech sector. With real estate, it's dire. There's been houses that have been up on the market for quite a while now, and they're starting to just get discounted more and more. And then we also have a lot of people getting laid off. People attempting to apply for hundreds of jobs in the course of a month and not get a single call back because AI has already replaced those jobs. And that's just the start. So we're in a very interesting time right now. I don't even know what to compare it to. It might be like 2000 into 2002, like that kind of strange, like what are we going to do with this new technology? And of course, I'm hinting towards the .com bubble. So we'll be going through all of this today. I hope you guys appreciate my energy to kick this one off. I'm feeling actually amazing. I don't know about you, but I feel like over the past 2 to 3 weeks that there was this pent up energy and then it all got released and now I'm feeling very clear, very focused. I'm also restarting my meetings over with the university that I run this upcoming week. So I'm really excited to start doing my group coaching calls with them. Shout out to Waters Above University. But all in all, I'm just feeling like a big weight has been lifted off my shoulders, and perhaps that is in alignment with the way the market's been feeling too. So there's a lot to cover today in this podcast. As you can imagine, we have a lot to get through. But quickly, before we get started, as always, make sure to get relaxed. Get comfortable, grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if it's a little earlier in the day, or a glass of wine or beer or any beverage of your choice if it's getting a little later out there in the matrix. And also make sure to comment below this post here on Patreon to vote on the altcoins that you'd like me to cover in next week's Red Pill podcast. But before you leave a comment, please just make sure that you use the search function here on Patreon to check that I have not covered the project in at least 3 months. So in the event that it's been over 3 months since I've last reviewed that specific altcoin, or if I've never covered that altcoin before, as long as it has at least 1 year of chart history here on TradingView, you can go ahead and comment below with the name of the altcoin and the ticker symbol as well. And whatever submissions get the most likes, those top 4 will be selected for next week's Red Pill. And by the way, because last week I did a What I'm Investing in special, that means this week we combined the top votes from last week's submissions and this week's submissions, and I selected 5 different altcoins from that list. So we're back on track now. I hope you guys appreciated and enjoyed last week's What I'm Investing in special. It was about 2 hours long, so it was like a full crypto masterclass considering all the charts we went over. And I did share a new venture capital play, potential new position I might be adding to my portfolio. I'm not sure when I'll execute that. I'll let you guys know, of course, over in the Discord and the What I'm Buying and Selling text channel. But until then, let's recap everything that's gone on in this market over the past week. And I want to kick things off here. You guys have been looking at this chart for a minute now. I know there's a lot going on here. It's a bit to unpack, but I believe this is the chart of all charts that could provide us with clarity during these times in the market where things start to get overwhelming, uncertain, confusing, and polarizing. So let's unpack this step by step, and I'll share my thoughts along the way. And to make this easier to follow along, I color-coded it as much as possible, focusing mostly on the section with these arrows. But before we get there, let's actually review the pattern that makes up all of what we're looking at. And this way we can see how things have been going for the past couple years and how seasonality could be tied into it all. First, you'll see these downsloping trend lines in white as such. They all acted as, of course, a resistance until there was a clean bullish breakout, which in all three iterations actually led to an 80 to 90 day pump. So we're talking about this downsloping white resistance trend line, this resistance trend line right here, the breakout, and the recent breakout. So we have the most recent iteration measuring from this breakout candle on July 9th over to the top over there on this 3-day candle of October 7th. As you're all aware, the Bitcoin all-time high was October 6th. And there you have it. It's a 90-day span. And now this is where things get interesting, because when we measure from the lows on June 12th, 2023, so we're looking right here, and we measure over to the blue circle with the red arrow. So we have that right here. You have 224 days. Then if you measure from the pivot, which is right here, the following day, over to the next pivot, you're going to have 225 days. So effectively from here to here, and then from here to here are the same amount of time. And then when you go from the August 2024 lows, which is this circle right here, it was the lowest price we traded at in this microcycle, and you measure it over to the next major pivot, which was on the time frame of the total lunar eclipse. Many of you remember it. It was March 14th when we had that. So leading into that date, we had a major market bottom. We, of course, then had a double bottom with the April 7th move. But what we're pointing out here is from this major move to the next major move also took about 220 days within 1 week of the prior examples. So I just showed you back to back to back to back examples where we're around almost the same amount of days from bottom to bottom to bottom. And then we have from this March 11th pivot over to this past Friday, which would have been October 16th 3-day candle, and there you have it again, 219 days, just like the last example. Now, if I was to look at this on the daily chart, it might even be more dialed in. We're looking at 3-day candles, by the way, so it's every 3 days, new candle opens, etc., right? So this is pretty fascinating how we're getting this kind of cyclical nature from bottom to bottom to bottom to bottom, and it's been pretty much happening seasonally as well. So the big question is, of course, is the bottom in? I mean, the bigger question is the bull run over, right? Biggest question everyone has is the top in for Bitcoin? Is the bull run over? Well, I want to address is the bottom in a moment. But before that, just to touch on is the bull run over idea. Well, It's very weird for them to end the bull run without us being in euphoria. And for the most part, I don't even really feel like Bitcoin has been in euphoria because it's just been repeating the same stair stepping pattern over and over again. And we haven't really had like a noticeably bullish breakout for Bitcoin since pretty much this time frame over here leading into Trump's inauguration. I mean, everything that we've seen since the recovery, it's been fine, I guess, but not so wild. I mean, of course, we've seen some big moves in things like Ethereum into the recovery that it had. We also saw what happened with Binance token. That was clearly a very, very solid move up, and it looks very euphoric, I suppose, from like a price perspective, but retail probably wasn't part of that either. So it feels like the real last time we had euphoria was going back to December of last year into January at the beginning of this year, when we were hearing a lot of the stuff that was happening like on the Solana chain. That was definitely wild. Lots of meme coins. Every influencer of known to man was creating their own scam. And yeah, it was a time where you'd wake up every day and you're like, what's new today? But of course, it was all leading into Trump's inauguration. So there's that other like exoteric, like, you get it. I don't even want to waste my time talking about this shit because you guys can learn this from everybody else. I want to stick to what I specialize in and what I want to focus on today. And it's just to say that I don't think Bitcoin has finished off just yet because the move that we've had is not as elusive as usually it is. And that goes for everything in the crypto space for sure, not just Bitcoin. Now, the other thing is if the top is in Bitcoin, we still haven't had a major breakdown in Bitcoin dominance. So if Bitcoin were to top at 126K and that's it, that is fine by me. I don't think we need much more. The thing is does all of that spill over into the altcoins? That's the big question. So a lot of people right now are in that position where we're watching, you're probably watching other analysts, you're listening to like everybody's opinions. Some people say the top is, but like guys, in 2020 into 2021, it was the same shit. It was pretty much identical. And I'm sure for those that were around in 2017, you probably got the same sort of shenanigans going on where it's this person's opinion versus this person's opinion versus this person's opinion. And it doesn't really get you too far. Because almost every time the market entered extreme fear and we had really discounted prices, it was always the best time to accumulate. So that's not me saying that right now is the best time to accumulate. In my opinion, we're kind of past that, and there's a lot of coins that look like absolute shit right now, and those might be like last minute opportunities for you. But point being is like we've been in this cycle for quite a while now, and it seems very odd for them to end it without like a really euphoric moment. Of course, this cycle does feel different in some ways, but so far we're looking at Bitcoin trading in price discovery in Q4, 4 years later in the post-halving year. I mean, this isn't much different. Just remember that the final move of the cycle is always the most violent. It's always the most positive. It's always the most greedy. And it's happening in things that's kind of like retail is mostly involved in. The last cycle was NFTs and DeFi stuff and lots of memes, of course. I think this time it's going to be no different. I think it's going to be more of a repeat of what happened in Q4 of last year, but it should be a little bit more explosive because that's typically how the market maker likes to trap everybody. Very similar to what's happening in the gold chart right now, which is going absolutely parabolic. And if this were to stall out here and reverse, that would not be weird because you have literally people for the first time in their lives lining up in queues for hours at the bullion shops. I love saying it that way. I'm just joking, guys. The point is that if people are lining up to buy physical gold for the first time in their lives and it's happening on a bullish breakout pretty late stage, you just and figure it out for yourself. Like you do the math. I think you get it. And by the way, if you're somebody with a really long time horizon on your investment, there's nothing wrong with buying gold at 4,000 maybe, you know? This could be $10,000 in 20 or 30 years. Why not? But the point is that look at where the herd is going and avoid. So the herd right now is leaving crypto in masses. They've mostly gotten liquidated. So I would feel anybody who's in a revenge trade right now, which is probably in a short, is also about to get liquidated, like a short squeeze. So I know that was a very long-winded, like waters above opinion stream of consciousness, and I admit that. That was a bunch of opinion. But I'm just kind of giving you guys some of my own thoughts here as these things progress. For the rest of today's podcast, we will do our best to stick to the data, you know, what we're seeing in the charts. But I did feel it answers probably some of those questions that you guys might have. You know, these things that I can normally answer on like a live stream. So getting back to the original question from everything that I shared, is the bottom in? So I'll speak for myself and say I think we need to be cautious here, because although October typically finishes off bullish for Bitcoin, that doesn't necessarily mean it will feel so amazing for altcoin holders if that turns out to be the case. And that was how it was back in 2013, 2017, and 2020, and 2023, and last year in 2024. So in plain English, in all of those years that I just listed, it kind of felt like shit to be in altcoins all through October, even into most of November. It's just facts. And all of those years have something in common. So if you were a crypto investor during those times, you might have felt uneasy during the start of Q4. But then once October was out of the way, things started to get exciting again to finish off the year. And with October 2/3 of the way over, with Bitcoin currently around 5% down on the monthly, it's obviously not feeling like a Uptober. But remember, Bitcoin can do some miraculous shit in a very short amount of time. It wouldn't shock me if there was a catalyst that hit soon, and that could easily push Bitcoin back above 120K. And keep in mind, the highest monthly close for Bitcoin is just shy of 116K. And from where we're trading at now, we'd only need a 7% or so recovery from here to end up closing the month at a new all-time high. You guys know Bitcoin can put on a 7% move in a single fucking day. This is normal in crypto. So if we were to entertain closing at 120K Bitcoin, which would be like $4,000 higher than the highest monthly close that we've ever had, that would only be a 10% move from here. This is nothing for Bitcoin. And I'm not saying that emotionally, I'm saying that based on data, okay? So all I'm saying is, don't count Bitcoin out too early, especially when the sentiment is in the dumps, especially when we see the sentiment poking into extreme fear. So getting back to this chart, if you were to measure from this late October pivot, the one that happened in October 22nd of 2023, and then again on October 24th, 2024. And keep in mind, those two dates that I just mentioned are happening next week. So when we measure from those dates over 80 days, you're going to see where it takes us. So we end up with a pivot top, right? We're landing on January 10th. And if you measure from the October 25th candle over here, and you were to take it over 80 days, you're going to see that brings us to around January 13th or so. If we were to measure the 90-day move, that brings us to around January 22nd. That's just shortly after the January new moon, which keep in mind, the January new moon was bullish for Bitcoin in both 2023 and last year in 2024. And to finish off the cycles back in the 2017 into 2018 alt season, even though Bitcoin did top in the December new moon of 2017, it had a major correction and then it came back up for a bull trap into the new moon of January. So for me, I don't give a shit if we topped in October 6th or if we top in November 19th or if we top in December 19th. It's all about the rotation that matters. Because at this point, I don't know how much juice is left in the fruit for Bitcoin, and I've been very clear about this for a long time. Even when I created my crypto decoding blueprint, I shared my thoughts about how I felt about stock to flow model, about pi cycle top indicator, like all of these things. They work until they don't. And this is where esoterica is really important, but this is also where staying neutral is important too. And to just realize, unless you're buying the absolute bottom on Bitcoin, the ROI isn't usually on your side. Now, this cycle, it's felt really good to be a Bitcoin maxi, like no duh. But I think if you got positioned at pretty rock bottom levels in XRP, you're doing really well too. If you got positioned in a lot of like Solana at the rock bottom levels, you're doing very, very well. Even on some of these OG projects like Monero, for example, or TRX, Tron, these look amazing right now compared to where they bottomed, right? So we're now looking at a market that's like becoming a little bit more like 2017 in those ways instead of like 2021, which is fine. That's great. I'm just letting you guys know these things are adjusting, and it will come to another pivot point with more of these regulations, with many of them recently just passing since Trump's inauguration. Things like the Genius Act and Clarity, etc. So getting back to this, we have this date range to consider into late January. And if you were to measure from this flash crash that happened on October 10th, and this also, by the way, perfectly backtested the resistance. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but we have 1, 2, 3 major touch points, a bullish breakout, and then we have a perfect backtest on prior resistance to potentially confirm it as a new support. That's really great to see, because not only are you backtesting that major trend line, you're backtesting this double top over here, a micro double top. But still, nonetheless, you're backtesting that, and this would be a very solid level to launch from, even though it was a liquidation festival across the board for pretty much everything. But just bringing up some of these technicals to keep in mind. It feels scary, but this is kind of the stuff that you actually want before more continuation. But when we measure from this particular candle, and then you're going over 80 days, you're actually going to end up around December 30th. And I wanted to bring this up because based on timing alone, this means that we could still have an official Bitcoin cycle peak before the end of this calendar year. And that would make it a nearly perfect 4-year cycle. Just saying. Like that would be the end of conversation with regards to this 4-year cycle idea. Now, I get it that it's likely to go into 2026. And if that's what it takes for people to feel like, oh, look, the 4-year cycle doesn't matter anymore, then great. I don't know like what to tell those people either. It's all feeling like a cult to me now. It's like I don't even know what to say anymore. But I hope that my energy around this, like it speaks for itself. 4-year, 5-year, 3-year, who the fuck cares? Like, it's all about, did you make money in this cycle? Did you get in when everybody else was scared or bored or worried? And did you get out when everyone was happy, excited, euphoric, and just thinking we're going to keep going up and up and up forever? So it's clear to me that there's signs of the end is very, very soon. But remember what I told everyone in October of 2024, before a year ago, before we had that eclipse. Some of you might remember because we had a total solar eclipse over here. I said we're in the beginning of the end. Me and Sama and many other people that I had podcasts or interviews with discussed this, and how Trump is like the perfect character to be in everybody's face during the beginning of the end. It's kind of a perfect setup because he's a confidence man, and you want a confidence man during a fucking bubble, right? So it's the same kind of energy with the Obama times. It's like nobody really gave a shit about what was happening with the housing crisis and all the other stuff that was broken, because they're like, look at this guy, he makes me feel good. He's saying the things that I don't know how to say. And it's that confidence. And that's why they pick the players that they pick at the times that they pick them. This is why they pick Biden to be in control at the time they picked him, because it's the perfect puppet to put in place to just continue on this grand chess game that they're playing. You all know what I mean. So getting back to this, to wrap this up, I just want you to look over at this blue box on the left, and we'll start following along these color-coded arrows that I mentioned earlier. Starting with the white arrow, which points out to the breakout candle. You could see over here, I believe it's the same as over here. And then you'll see that from that breakout candle to the local top, it's 80 days later. From this breakout candle to the local top, it's about 87 or so days later. And then we have from this breakout candle to this bear trap, or what will be this red arrow, it took 92 days. And then over here, it took 93 days. That's pretty perfect. And then from the red arrow, we have the next leg up taking about 15 days to this breakout time frame. And from here, 15 days brings us into October 25th. That would be next Saturday. So if you were to look at how many days the breakout was in the past two iterations, the bullish breakout that followed took around 36 days max, with a majority of the run-up happening in 30 days. And what's wild is, if you were to measure from October 22nd over 30 days, you end up on November 21st, and that's the day after the November new moon, which you can see right here. That's the new moon that lands during the 47th week of the year. Been talking about this for a while now. So pretty much since the month of May, we've been talking about expecting the 47th week of the year to be big, because in May, we watched Bitcoin recover for 47 days, hitting a new all-time high after crashing into April 7th, the 4/7 date. That would be written 7/4 internationally, and Bitcoin bottomed at 74K on that exact day. And guess what's 47 days after October 6th, the current Bitcoin all-time high day, the day that many people are calling the top? That's right, 47 days after October 6th will be November 21st. The day after the new moon, which aligns perfectly with this measurement that I just showed you. And with the $4.7 trillion market cap ahead of us for the crypto market, it wouldn't surprise me if we hit that target next month, perhaps late next month, to take everyone by surprise after this recent bearish sentiment has washed over the crypto space. But as for the full 65% move up to the $5.3 trillion level, that's of course possible late next month, but it would make more sense for that to happen in December for me. And we have to see where Bitcoin dominance is at and take it from there. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to take a sip of water. All right, check the levels. We are good. And speaking of Bitcoin dominance, just expand this a little bit more. Bitcoin dominance was also weak last November. Last November is this big red candle here, and December you see a push down into like 54%. And in 2023, that was the same case as well. You could see right here, this is the November red candle. This is the December red candle. It also marked a pivot low. So we have a correction pivot low. We have a correction pivot low happening in the same months. So I wonder if we can close off the monthly candle for November, so we're not talking this month, but next month, if we could close it off below 57%, finally breaking, sorry, below 58%, excuse me, and finally break below 57%, which by the way, the last time we did that was in December of last year. So if this were to occur, I think that would be the ideal setup for the quote-unquote alt season, to give us the final push up for the alts into Q1 of 2026. And of course, this is speculation, but with the annular solar eclipse that'll be happening on February 17th, paired with the total lunar eclipse on March 3rd, and by the way, that's the final total lunar eclipse for a while, for years. This means we'll have a big vortex of energy heading into the month of February in 2026, and that's seemingly the setup for the final alt run. And one other thing to mention before I continue is some people are entertaining that this might be the end of the lunar cycle for altcoins. Now, I haven't really found a clear, concise pattern for all altcoins for my solar and lunar cycle theory and the chart that I've created, which is specifically for Bitcoin. And so far, Bitcoin has been continuing to just suck liquidity out of all these shitcoins. So this is why I've entertained the post September 7th total lunar eclipse to have a new all-time high, and we technically just did it in October, early October. But with that being said, that would definitely be interesting if we see something like that where Bitcoin actually will go up into, let's just say, the end of the year, and we have one of those like lackluster altcoin moves again. But then when we get through March 2nd, we actually bottom for everything, and then we have a crazy move up in to the next solar eclipse. I don't believe that's going to happen, by the way. I am not entertaining that, but I've seen a couple of people who follow my stuff who like have been using this esoteric analysis that have shared those opinions with me and thoughts, and I can't just throw them away. I mean, it's cool to see people even using my work, you know? So anybody out there that's coming up with their own theories using these eclipses with the crypto market, that's awesome. You know, I think it's really cool and I'm honored. I just can't at this time accept that 2026 is going to be like this all year bullish year. I will accept that Q1's a possibility, but beyond March 2nd, I just don't know. It's very, very strange to imagine, but there is no denying the fact that this will be the last total lunar eclipse we have for a long time. Like a very, very long time. Excuse me, pretty much till I think New Year's 2029. So let me show you this really quickly. I believe I'm correct. Yeah. You see, so this is the eclipses in 2028. That will be on New Year's Day. What a fucking crazy day for there to be a total lunar eclipse, right? So we won't have another total lunar eclipse from March of 2026 all the way till January 1st, New Year's 2029. You can't deny that, but that would be too good. That would be too good. I mean, wow. If we can bottom on March for everything and then just clear skies ahead all the way until fucking January 2020. I mean, we're there's so much we can think of to you know, the only thing I'll say is that's a Shemitah year. So like it would be great if Bitcoin's just in a forever bull run and like we have the worst of it right now, and then we start to recover off of the quote unquote worst of it, like we did for Bitcoin in the past ends of the lunar cycle. I hope I'm making sense. This is a lot to talk about, man. Like this is a lot of shit to talk, as they say. Maybe let's make a podcast dedicated to that, okay? I don't know when I'll do it. Maybe next week, we'll see. I'll dedicate a podcast to that, like the solar lunar cycle concept, and kind of give people a little bit of a rundown. And then that way we don't need to make today's podcast get off the rails. Okay. I love you guys. Let's continue this one. And then I'll share my thoughts on the, I don't even know what to call it, experimental eclipses podcast. All right. So what I was saying before is that, with regards to the energetics of it all and the way that Bitcoin dominance has its extremes in December, typically, we could even see here, we have the last we have the last time Bitcoin dominance was very, very up, very high, was December 2020. And then we have here again in December 2017. It would be interesting if, again, there was a major pivot. And we're about to get into the gold chart a little bit, so I'll break that down too. And yeah, this is actually how things were for the final setup for the final alt run in early 2014, 2017, and 2021. And it would, of course, be a glorious way to end this cycle, where we just have a very, very bullish January 2026 for the altcoins. Also, for those in the States or any of those countries where like that would be a separate tax year, I'm not sure if that's the case for those over in Australia or other countries around the world. I'm aware we're a global community of people from all around the world following, but for those that are invested in crypto, it's actually kind of nice if a majority of the gains were to come in after the new calendar year, just for tax purposes. So keep that in mind. Not that that matters what we want. We don't necessarily always get what we want, but I'm just letting you know. It wouldn't be bad for that to go down that way. And if there's an opportunity for those Bitcoin holders out there to rotate out of Bitcoin due to a major move up into like the 47th week of the year or even the December new moon, then fucking congratulations, get out of Bitcoin and rotate. And that would be a beautiful play. That would be what everyone said they wanted to do in 2017 and 24 and 2020. Like everyone said they wish they did that, but very few people did because it's hard to execute. It's not easy. So I'm getting back to this. That's very clearly a bullish case that we've covered in great detail. And it's, of course, important to also entertain the bearish case as well. So now we're going to head over into the charts and be as honest and thorough as possible with where we're at right now. And I'll point out any crucial invalidations to keep in mind in the event that this fruit starts to get rotten. But again, my personal opinion is that there's still juice left in this fruit for the altcoins. Not so much Bitcoin, but for the altcoins. And I think a lot of juice will come from what's potentially going to happen next with gold. So let's start there to review the chart that I gave you a sneak peek of a little bit earlier. And this way we could assess how this will play out for us here in this cycle. But I want to start off very theoretically with just talking about this move over here. So we had a Black Swan event, March 2020, C19 crash. Then we have the Black Swan event, tariff crash in April, very close together. We had a quick recovery and push higher. Here we have it, a quick recovery and push higher into the same month. So you see here is April. Here is April. Then we had this sideways, and then finally we lift off. And here we, interestingly enough, stalled out at the same daily RSI level. So you can see we hit the, I don't want to speak too soon because this past Friday was a crazy day for gold. Major spike up, major sell off, a little bit of absorption. This is a wild thing to see. It's a once in a lifetime thing to see for many people, like this doesn't come around too often, especially as a conscious investor, somebody who's, and I don't even mean consciousness, I mean somebody who's actually actively looking at charts and paying attention. For silver, this is like a literal once in a fucking lifetime thing. Like most people never have been in this much profits in silver. This is the, consider yourself lucky if you've been stacking, even though inflation has kind of fucked you, no offense, but like it is what it is. My point is that have a party, silver investors. You made it. You guys made it, man. Like finally 45 fucking years and now it's finally breaking out. I'm happy for you. I don't even own any silver and I'm happy as shit for you guys, for real. Legends. Gold, I was invested in gold and I already told everybody my story. I didn't know how I got so lucky here, but I don't want to call it luck because I study the esoterica. So I bought all my gold leading into what ended up being the Black Swan event of October 6th. Fucking crazy. So all my gold was accumulated under 1,900 per ounce. Probably some of the lowest you can get in before the major parabola. So wherever I'm at right now, I don't personally really care too much. This is not a flex. 130% is amazing on gold, but I still feel like gold for me is a very, very long-term play. So I've been open. I don't want to sell right now. I have my own theory on where things are going into the future. I might be wrong, but I feel for the most part, all this research and study that I've done got me into gold at the time that was right. I didn't want to get into gold all through this. And that was why bringing up the Shemitah year and the Jubilee was might be so important for that upcoming eclipse podcast that I'll do for everybody. because again, like 2028 will have its own energy about it that'll be very, very ritualistic and very important to the elite, because that's their harvest year. That's the year that they do some of the craziest shit that we ever see on the world stage, you know? So for the people that want to understand why we had C19 when we had it, well, the answer is because it was leading into a Shemitah year. If you want to know why the dot-com bubble crashed when it did, it was because it was the Shemitah year. If you want to know why the '08 crisis happened, subprime crisis, it was because of the Shemitah year. If you want to look at the bond market crashing in 93 into 94, it was because of the Shemitah year. I mean, that is what it is. So what do you think 2028 has in store for us? If you're paying attention and you know, you'll be doing very fucking well. If you're somebody who's just getting caught up in your emotions and you're always doing the wrong thing that retail ends up doing because they start getting panicked, then you'll be getting their results. So this is a time where you really need to be tough. You really need to be tough, and you need to learn self-custody. You need to stop falling for scams. I see this shit happening all the time. People are falling for scams right now. Funny enough, you guys know when the most scamming is successful? Is during times where the market is about to become very, very bullish. It's crazy. But every time you hear the most stories about people getting scammed, like recently there's been a story floating with XRP, person who got like, they didn't get scammed. I mean, they just basically dropped the bag. Yeah, this kind of stuff happens to people like right before we go bullish. Anyways, I want to stay on track here. Point is that there's a big similarity in this chart here. And when this all occurred, what this led to, you see it was from around August into March, and then finally late March into April. Well, that was when all the altcoins pivoted and about as high as they got. Some of them made it into April. Some of them made it into May. You know, Dogecoin made it into May. But for the most part, this was a 19% correction for gold, funny enough, during C19. And that was a huge rotation into Bitcoin and the altcoins. That was when we had our last quote unquote alt season. And it was post C19 crash, sentiment reset, this sideways move that launched us up into actually a new all-time high at the time. And then once things got very, very exciting in gold, then they switched it up. And then the stock market continued to go much higher. Bitcoin and crypto continued to go much higher. And now we're hearing of talks of QE. So quantitative tightening could be finalizing, and we could be hearing those words dribble out of the mouth of Vader Powell. So if this man says quantitative easing on a microphone on camera, you will watch the skin leave the skeletons of retail investors. Like, you'll feel the rocket exhausts. Like, you know, when the G-force is so high, you could feel like the skin is peeling off your face. Like, that's what it's going to look like. I'm not even trying to make you guys laugh right now. Like, that's the level of euphoria that we haven't had in a long time. It's going to feel like that. So then you're going to see people lining up to quote unquote buy altcoins, right? It's going to become that again, which we haven't had in a while now in crypto, in my opinion. So keep an eye on this, because I think the fact that if you look at this correction down to where it pivoted, and the fact that that full 19% correction was back testing this horizontal trading range right here, that was post V-shaped recovery. If you were to look at where we are right now and we were to come back to this back to the zone that we were trading at post recovery, like this sideways chop, this could be also about a 20% correction. It's not going to happen. Like, I don't think it's going to be a blow off top. This can take some time. Over here, it took like 300 days, believe it or not. Let me quickly show you. Yeah, like over here, it took 240 days. So if this took 240 days, look at where this would bring us to. This would bring us all the way out into fucking like July, right? Into June of 2026. Guys, that's a possibility. And the rotation could just happen faster. Like, we'll speculate on that. But my point is that if the top is momentarily in for gold, then it could be very slow in the way that it sells off. And that's the way that it is. It's much harder to sell gold too. You don't just pop on when you're selling crypto, you guys know you have your phone in your pocket, you're signed into the exchange. You could just very quickly get rid of it. You can't really do that with physical gold. Well, now you can. Today people will buy, like, anybody will buy your gold from you because it's FOMO time. So consider that. You know what I'm saying? It's much easier to sell up here at these prices than it'll start to be when we come back here. If we were to come back to 3,500 gold, you're not going to see people want to buy that shit anymore. So just consider. That's why after this sell-off over here, it was sideways for a long fucking time. That's 1,300 days before it broke out again. Just saying. So keep this stuff in mind, guys. I will continue to keep track of this, but for now, I think things are very overheated in gold. I would say that it's time for a correction. Look at right here. The fact that we are looking at a monthly RSI of 92. A monthly RSI of 92. The last time we've had RSI this high is going back to 1980. You know, we talked about this on a recent podcast. This is overheated. So be careful. You know, this is probably a good time to de-risk gold for the people that need the money. If you don't need the money and you're kind of somebody who's a little bit more long-term with it, or unless you have very little amounts of gold and it's negligible and it's not really worth it, then look long-term. But obviously, I'm not in a position to tell anyone what to do with their finances. I'm not your financial advisor. You have to come up with your own plan for what you do with your own finances. I'm just speaking for myself. If I have a very little amount of gold right now, I wouldn't care to sell. If I had a lot of it, a major crazy amount of it, then I would definitely de-risk some. There's nothing wrong with de-risking. And by the way, de-risking means you're getting your money back, your hard-earned cash. For some people, that might not be so worth it on the gold play. But has that ever been the case? Unless you got into gold back in like 1960 or some shit. It's usually not producing that type of ROI to change the game. I mean, even this 130% ROI that I've experienced over the years, like, what does that really matter when you consider how much food prices have gone up? When you look at the cost of hotel prices, flights, you name it, everything is going up. Even Netflix membership has gone up in that time. So it's like, what does it really mean? You know, you need much, much more gains from this stuff in order to see the type of returns that you would want. Otherwise, it's like break even in some ways, especially with dealing with physical gold. You know, you have these fees and then people are going to try to negotiate with you. And it's like, mamma mia. Anyways, let's move on. We've spent a lot of time talking about Bitcoin today. I've showed you so much with regards to the couple of charts here. This is a very scary chart, by the way, that I've looked at a couple times, where we have this crazy rising wedge pattern that's been in play for a long time. I'm not sure. Okay, it's not loading up so much, but this, again, people want to call out the patterns, and there's no doubt that this is in a sketchy place where we've reached the apex of this pattern and we have broken down. So when we see these types of things, guys, understand that there's a thing called a kickback, and this also happens when you reach the apex of a pattern and it breaks one direction, but then it like recoils and goes the other way, and then we see the chop continue. So I'm not sure necessarily the percentage that this happens with the rising wedge patterns versus pennants versus bull flags versus symmetrical triangles versus asymmetrical, you know, like all of these patterns. For the pattern traders, you guys probably know a little bit more than I do, but just keep that in mind. And then there's this pattern too, which we talked about. We have this top over here, we have this chop, and then now we're back testing it. And this would be really an area of past resistance that we would want to hold. So I'm going to just quickly do the macro TA on Bitcoin. I want to see where the weekly's at. I want to see where the 55 is at, and then we'll go through the rest. So we have the 55 SMA. That's the make or break for me. If Bitcoin starts closing below the weekly 55 simple moving average, then I would say, guys, it's likely that this is a bigger correction ahead. And right now, that 55 SMA, it sits at 98,500. Next week it will probably close, or sorry, later today it will close and it will be at 99,000. The week after that it'll be at 100,000. And now as it catches up to the same level that we just washed out to, it's not as unsafe because you can see that's what happened this time. We had a major move up here, we went sideways, we kissed the 55 simple, we broke out, and we came back and tested it really quickly, same level as back here, 55 simple, and we kept it moving. So that's like why early November's weird. Because last year we got very weird in early November, and then remember we had the election, and then it was just boom, straight line breakout. And the Fed had a meeting like the day after the election, right? So that coupled with Trump's election victory, it gave the exoteric vibes for everybody to just go all in into speculative assets. So keep this also in mind. I don't think closing below the 55 weekly in this market would be good for us. I would think that's very, very bad. So I don't want to see that. As long as we're holding above it, it's fine. But closing below that, that would be a first for us since back here. And this was the double top of 2021. You can see what happened here if you zoom in. It was when we started closing below the 55 simple weekly moving average that this started to become clearly a problem. And then when we came back to it to retest it and then got rejected, that was when it was lights out. Okay. So a lot of people that talk about the top is in, but and then they compare what we're experiencing to the double top of 2021, which might be the case, but I'm just letting you know, like that was really, really a much more technical play than anything. It's not an opinion. And then if you follow my work, you know about the wolf cross. The wolf cross is the 8 simple moving average and the 55 simple moving average. So when we had the 8 cross below the 55, that was, again, lights out. And if you study my work, you'll know that we always want to do the opposite of whatever the cross creates. So for example, if we were to have a wolf cross over here where the 8 goes above the 55, you could expect us coming back close to the 55, or if not to retest the 55, and then you will see continuation off of it. We had that happen right here. I know it's very tough to see, but we have the 8 above the 55, it crosses, then we trade on top of it, and then we launch from it. And then over here, we have the 8 cross below the 55, deeper correction, but then we have the bull trap get rejected off of it, and then that would be your exit. So this would be your entry, that would be your exit. Even over here, you can see the same thing happened. We have the 8 crossing below the 55 simple. We came back to it, we got rejected, and then we had a deeper correction. So this is like a gorgeous and simple TA lesson that you're all getting right here. And I think that'd be the perfect place to move on. So until I see us closing below the 55, until I see the 8 simple crossing below the 55 simple, and even then we would have a rebound into it no matter where it is, which sits around 100K almost. That's stuff to consider. And for the bear case, November was the worst of it in 2023. So for the fact that we have the altcoins like in such shit territory besides the top projects, I mean, there's that. The fact that we did have a not so amazing October 2022, we pivoted up to close out the month nicely, and then we had a total lunar eclipse here, which is the reason why I'm not really banking on November to be a bloodbath unless there's a black swan event. And then in the case, I'm like, why would they do that? Like in April this year, it made sense to do the tariff shit because we had a total lunar eclipse around that time. We were in a lunar, anyways. Yes, we did just have a total lunar eclipse in September. So I guess, there's always room for that, but it doesn't feel like the right time to do it without any euphoria across the altcoins. Quickly, Ethereum, same story where we had this kind of quote unquote triple top vibe. We broke out above it, we back tested it, and now we're holding. It doesn't look so strong, but as I said, it's during these times where we typically see very weak altcoins. So we have October into November. You can see right there is October 16th, October 9th. So we're pretty much wrapping up the October 16th candle right now. If you were to entertain that, today's October 19th, by the way. So this type of weakness from July down, we could see here is from August, but back testing this is a very technical thing and it's needed. And it's not only back testing that, it's back testing this first like parabolic move that we had for ETH during the last alt season. So we're getting a back test of that key level, of that key level, of all of this. And then we're back testing all of this. But yes, it does look like a macro double top. Nobody could deny that. Nobody could deny that. But when would they want to do this type of move to you? It would be after we get fully recovered. So I showed you that over here. You zoom in and you see that ETH experienced this correction. That's 37% before breaking out again. So recently, what have we experienced? Almost 30% correction after we finally got a quote unquote new all-time high. So for me, it very much feels like that. And then look at what follows is a very sharp, quick move to the upside. So it doesn't last much longer than that. Let's go over to XRP. XRP again. Ooh, this is really important to bring up. We finally backtested the weekly 55 SMA. Wow. Okay, so in the last cycle, remember, it was kind of fucked up for XRP because we had this lawsuit right here with Ripple and the SEC. But when we got bought up from that after all the delistings, and then we had the first major correction into the total lunar eclipse, you can see that we came back to the 55 simple twice. And we're finally doing that. This last week's candle is fucking crazy. Like, I don't even look at that. But what we're seeing here is that from there, we did have quite the bounce. Let's go to the last cycle. Yep, and remember, we explored this. This is crazy. The Binance chart, bro. So on Binance, it also did the same thing. It like just swiped through everything. It like pretty much went to zero. And then it got bought all the way back up. And then that was the final move, the pivot, which, by the way, it came in December. So you guys remember the chart that I drew for you? I'll try to find it real quick. It might be here. Yeah. So this chart that I drew for you, which, I mean, it is kind of invalidated, but the reason why it's not is the fact that it brought up the idea that we could have that move down. And also, like, I had it drawn up here, which if I was to just adjust it, it would be like this. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we were to entertain that, it would just be a move down and then sideways chop. And the reason why I had it set up that way was because that's how it was over here. We had this chop all the way until early November. Same thing. And then we just lifted off. So if we were to take from this top over here, which was July, over here you can see it's July. I'm going to actually just take the bars and show you. It's pretty wild. Let me change the color for you. I'll make it bright so you can see like the type of fuckery we're dealing with here, bro, because it's the same shit. You see like crown top, major move down, pop back up, kind of just squirreling around the middle, another pop back up, a little bit of a fake out, and then another move down. And then again, you have this kind of late October lull, and that would be when the FOMC meeting is, by the way. And then if we were to follow this, which I'm not necessarily saying I think is a perfect thing, but like it would be a release of energy into the month of November. And then it goes up, funny enough, all through November. And if it was to be a repeat of the move, it would get you to around, let's say, $13, $14. You know, of course, it's imperfect. It's imperfect, but you can see the structure. If I was to like hold it up and I was to delete some of the other noise here, you can see how it's fitting like a puzzle. With this move here that's lower, coming in and having like a really arduous and kind of fucked up October into the very, very beginning of November. And then there's a pivot. So I am definitely interested to seeing how that all shapes. I'll leave this here for now. I'll lighten this. It's not about the call as much as it is about seeing that we were talking about this kind of choppy, awkward October, November time for XRP because it does like to just have a straight line breakout. When it moves, basically. And now everything else is playing catch up. While it's had this crazy move already, then you saw what happened with Binance coming in later. We saw this crazy move already happen with HBAR and XLM. Now we're seeing it happen in a couple of other things. And then like now you're seeing even some isolated privacy coins going up. So it's very fascinating how like everything feels like it's catching up right now. Let's get over into finalizing today's podcast with these other altcoins that you guys have voted on. So coin number one, Klima, I'm not sure. Klima DAO. Now this whole chart, I'm guessing why people have wanted me to look at this is because if you zoom, and then you go from the breakout and you go up till today, it's up 140%. It's recently had a move as high as like 300%. So maybe everybody's been voting on it because they are like excited about this. Or maybe it's a very sophisticated reason, like they had some crazy partnership or something, whatever. But like when you zoom out on this chart, you're seeing like the apocalypse. Okay, like this is not good at all. So this is this accurate, guys? This thing used to be $2,000 a coin. What? What's going on? So is there a market cap chart? Is this like in another currency? Like I see USDC. Very confusing. So I looked at, let me just double triple check. So we have CoinGecko. We're going to type in Klima 28 cents. Okay. What's the all-time high? Three. Are you reading it too? It says $3,777. It is down to 100. It is down 100%. Okay, so this isn't inaccurate, dude. This thing spiked up to like, what is this? It was like more money than Bitcoin at some point. Yeah, this thing was 3,000. What is this? What is this? This is so fascinating. So yeah, it's literally down 100%. Um, this is so funny to do TA on this kind of stuff. So the laughs are over. Let me do my wizardry. Yeah, you can't. It gets worse. Okay, so quick thing, like with these reverse fib pulls, I saw the touch point here. I saw the touch point here with the major move up. So there's definitely some liquidity between this like $50 to $5 range, which is a massive range, by the way. That's that's 700% almost. And then the breakdown. So I just pulled the reverse fib like that because I wanted to see where the 1618 was hitting. And like I really don't know if you could go much lower than 10 cents. Like this is rock bottom. But that's why you look at tails and the wicks, because if you did pull it perfectly from this actual tail here to that top, you're now perfectly getting the swipe of the 1618. So what this teaches you guys a lesson in is whenever you're trying to find downside targets, I like to mark off both. So we have like multiple touch points here, like the most amount of touch points, but then you do have this outlier right there, and then you have the levels that it could potentially come down to. And then again, I'm going to now adjust this fib to be more according to the extremes, which would be that wick there. And then boom, you now have a range. So, I mean, guys, if you think about what I'm showing you, if you set your range according to what I just taught you, you would have got the perfect bottom. You would have never hit that. And you would have gotten 90% of the best prices possible on this thing. So even off of the middle of the zone, because you typically want to do like 5 buy orders, you would get one, two, three, four, five buy orders somewhere in the midst of this 11 to 18 cent range. Let's just say you got in at 14 cents on average. You're up right now 100%. So I don't look at charts all day. I'm not looking at these charts either, like these very speculative charts, meaning take what I teach you and apply it. So this top came in all the way back in March 2024. You could have already known this range well in advance because you already had the pivot low, you had the pivot high. You had everything. So this right here, when we had the breakdown, you could have said, okay, this is like a little sketchy, and then you can start doing the fibs in reverse, like I just taught you, and you'd be able to catch all of that on the downside. And then think about this: if you were to get the top of this range, like 17 cents, and you were to get all the way back to even like here. This level is interesting to me because of this breakdown here and the fact that we had the breakdown back to that level too. Of course, you can also always respect the 0.5 fib to keep things nice and easy. But like if you were to just get conservatively close to this level, that's a 700% move on an absolute shit coin. So this is like what I think I help people with the most is like you guys can find a lot of stuff from other analysts and people that are finding all these projects, and just do your best in being patient on getting into some of this stuff if you want to have some crazy plays. But you also need to know, where do you buy this stuff? Like how do you, I mean, if it's USDC chart, that means it should be available on Base. So Coinbase wallet should be pretty simple. If you have some Ethereum, you could swap it that way. I believe now on Coinbase, you don't even need ETH anymore. It's pretty convenient. You could just use USDC. So anywho, this spike up recently, just remember, between here and here is a massive liquidity zone that this has yet to fill out. So this can chop in this range for a lot longer than is comfortable. And that was what was happening the entire way down. So once this thing finally made it to here, like around $3, it spent from July 22nd all the way over for a year and a half, thinking that was like a fair price between 150 and 5, until it finally decided, like, I'm going to fill this lower level. And then we got to here, and then it was like, well, we're going to break through that and fill this lower level. So this thing is effectively slowly going to zero. And it's pretty obvious. So be careful with this stuff. This is not hodl material. This is something you have to trade in and out of, and I would be very cautious with projects like this. So I'll save this, and then as for upside targets, consider this level here around, let's call it 4. I'll just be really conservative and call it 4, because that's a level that we were getting a lot of interaction with. Apologies. I mean, even better, it would be 3 to 4. So yeah, that would be where I would take profits personally if I had this thing. Like in the all season, I would not expect it to go much better than this because it's just bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. But fuck, that's a 1000% move. Could potentially even get to the 1500. And crazy thing, kind of like something that happened with XCN, Onyx coin, which we're going to cover a little later, is you could have a crazy move that breaks through it all, and it kind of gets you back to a level that we haven't seen in a very, very long time. I'm not going to call that this early on this climb up project, or Klima, or whatever it's called. Moving on, we have Floki. This project is called Floki, guys. Isn't that funny? All right, so we have a fib pull from swing high to swing low. This has been going on for some time now. This is the top back in 2021, a double top into June 2024. Quite a weird time for us to do that. Since we've been retesting some of these retrace levels, this recent swipe down has came all the way back to the 382. So that's kind of what we've seen on a lot of these charts, is if they were bullish, a lot of them were reapproaching the 236 fib. So if you were to draw a line at where this level came through, it's actually a pretty technical level. So you can see the rejection here, support, bounce to the double top, liquidity all the way down to it. So that's not weird to me. Although obviously this was all like engineered to fuck everybody up, to liquidate everybody. But keep that in mind that we're still holding structure, in my opinion, on this because we have bear market low, higher low, higher low, higher low. And still, technically, I wouldn't get too worried on this until it starts closing below the macro zero point 0.5 fib. So until it starts getting below this level, it's still fine. Now, it does look like a bear flag was formed, and it does look like we're breaking out of the bear flag, but this type of stuff is really not the best to do on altcoins. I do like, though, the fact that it spent quite a bit of time filling out this area, which it didn't all here. You see? So once we broke below this territory, we were getting rejected off of it. And then now we've actually had this time above it, and we've also had this time below it. So this actually looks like a pretty good chart. It's a crazy fucking thing for me to say, but it's a big ass horizontal trading range. It's built a lot of trading volume in all of these areas. It's ready to go. I would say that this is on track for the 1618. I don't know about this particular 1618, but point, 4236. Let me get that above. Yeah, maybe this one. No, I take that back. This, yes, but that's a hell of a play. That's a hell of a play. That's another 2000% up. That's even me being nice. Because it could do like a Cardano and it might only make it to the linear 1618, which is like, that's totally normal too, especially for projects like this where there's like no reason for it to just keep going up and up and up. So yeah, consider that. And in the event that it were to be like the Cardano situation where it just barely makes a new all-time high this cycle, I mean, shit, it's still 700% from here. That's great. It's a lot better than most stocks. So yeah, I would consider that fine. Just be careful. Like, this is not something you throw all your money into. It's called fucking Floki, you know? Moving on to VRA, Veracity. Ooh, I see we're breaking out of the... Oh no. We're going to go to the 3-day. Oh, hold my beer. This is not good. Okay. So, I mean, this is like as bad as it should get, I hope. I'm not invested in this project. It has been covered so many times here on Red Pill, so clearly there's like communities out there that talk a lot about this project. Yeah. Anywho, clear rejections on the outside of this major resistance trend line, also clear supports building up to the last alt season, which did very well for Veracity. It went up 20 fucking thousand%, so that's pretty amazing. And then it's had a bear market, which you would have thought ended here, which would be 97% down, but it's like, nope, not yet, because here in April of 2025, it's now 99% down, and then just recently, it's a full 99.4% down. So it's all the way back to like where it started. And now I'm in some projects that look like this. I believe Filecoin might be one of them, maybe Gala. I'm in a couple projects that look like this. So it's not like, guys, don't feel any shame or any guilt. It happens. It's just you want to hope that it happens with a VC play, with a venture capital play, like something that tiny little investment. You know, maybe I have 1.5 or 2% max of my portfolio in Filecoin. So if Filecoin goes to shit, it doesn't destroy everything I'm holding. You understand? And that's how you have to be with plays like this. So understand, like, you can sleep easier at night when you don't put all your money in absolute shitcoin charts. And just be careful. You know, generally the advice here is you want to make sure that you're positioned in stuff that, if it were to lose 95% of its value or more, which by the way, like Solana even had a 95% correction in the last bear market. You know, if you're going to position yourself in that kind of stuff, understand it comes with that type of risk at any moment. You know, in this past liquidation ritual that we had in October 10th, it's clear that the market maker could wash us out whenever they want. They just press a couple buttons and boom, everybody's wiped out of every leverage position. So please just understand what you're working with here. Definitely never play leverage with any of the speculative altcoins. That is absolutely never do that. You could become actually insanely wealthy just trading Bitcoin with leverage and like 3x leverage or 2x leverage. You never even need a leverage trade anything else. Funny enough, and I'm not telling people to leverage trade. I'm just saying that like if you're going to ever get into leverage trading, even Bitcoin's enough to do very, very well. And it's funny how a lot of people go straight for the other stuff. And yeah, it's like really, really dangerous, man, obviously. So from a technical perspective here, we're kind of back in where we got started, and we broke a major support line, which I guess Veracity holders were hoping would hold. And now you're in kind of like the worst of the worst, because here was the C19 crash. Okay, just so you're aware. Like if you bought the worst of the worst, the C19 crash on Veracity, today you're up, but like you would have had to actually buy the bottom of the bottom. Comparing like where Bitcoin was till today, and it's a much much different story, you know. You bought the bottom on Bitcoin in the C19 crash. Even if you will be generous and say $6,000 Bitcoin, you were up 1,700% on Bitcoin. Like some of your eyes are rolling in the back of your head right now. You're like, I could have just bought Bitcoin. It's like, yeah, you could have just bought Bitcoin. You could have made it that easy. But yeah, obviously people don't ever want to make it that easy. So here we are. Opportunity of a lifetime. Is that what we're getting here with Veracity? I gotta admit, no. I think this thing will continue to go lower and lower and lower and lower for the rest of time. But where does it go during the alt season? Well, just keep in mind what I said earlier about the kickback. So the more I look at this chart, the more I'm entertaining that a kickback is in play. Because once you fulfill a pattern, eventually you break, usually like 75 to 80% on your way towards the apex. But then you have a kickback, and that could be something like this. So I'm not saying it's going to go all the way into 20 fucking 27, but just letting you know that that kickback, unfortunately, the highest it may go may be into some resistance levels. So you kind of want to entertain this zone right here, because that's where you're getting a lot of kicks in the stomach. Okay? But I mean, shit, if you were in at the bottom, the other bottom, the other bottom, I mean, at least you have the opportunity to get out at a 300% to potentially maybe 500% move, which is insane. You know, just breaking even if you're on a play that's deep in the red is a gift. So there's still a potential to get 100%, 200%, potentially up to 400% move with Veracity if you bought the best of the best bottom that used to be the bottom. Now the newer bottom is like, yes, that's going to be a much more impressive move, like a 1000% move, but getting in right now is a very late stage, and just be aware of what you're holding. You're holding into something that could just keep going lower and lower and lower, so you need to treat it as such. Jupiter. Okay, so we're looking at the same thing. Effectively, April. No, actually, I take that back. Not the same thing. We have the April lows. We have June, and we have here in October. So it's kind of like building quite a bit in this 30-cent range now, to the point where you would be hopeful that it doesn't take another leg lower. But the fact that it got rejected off the 236, I don't like that. What I can say though is this is ready for an automatic rally soon. So what we look for in that is the golden pocket, or up to the 888 if you're lucky. So this Jupiter play I would move on from personally. This is very very interesting how Year of the Dragon, this did very very well. That's a direct correlation. Year of the Snake, nah, not so not so sexy. So, but I would just keep this in mind. This area right here of around the 786 is clearly an area where there's a lot of profit taking. We could quickly swipe up there just as fast as we came down to this level. So it's just a recovery effectively. I'm not saying that we're going to literally crash in this exact fashion, but that's a very typical thing you see when it gets bought back to levels that you were previously getting rejected at. 888 is in the cards too. And then, of course, price discovery, which here are my levels for Jupiter ahead. I'm not so sold that these higher ones can be hit at this time. I mean, perhaps we could get to the $2 or $3 level. You could definitely take that for. I really don't. I'm just gonna be honest. I don't think these are as. I don't know. I gotta say, I'm just not feeling it. I'm not feeling that Jupiter's gonna make it up to this $3 level. I would love for everybody to be successful in all of their holdings, but when you're seeing Bitcoin hold so strong, and these newer projects that are launched are all kind of looking like similar charts, and then we're seeing a lot of charts recently break structure more and more and more. It's making me feel like we really need a crazy flood of money into this market for us to start entertaining this stuff. And then I feel bad like telling everyone today, oh, you should definitely expect this. But anyone could vouch for me. You can go back to the What I'm Investing in special, like number 5 or 6. And by the way, we've done 13 of them. And you'll hear me continuously bring up on these projects that look beaten and bruised about the golden pocket up to the 888, and how a lot of my exit strategy on some of these projects is built around that. I mean, even Doge recently hit the golden pocket, top of the golden pocket. So I mean, if you would have taken profits there, for example, you would have sold the current top before a 60 something percent correction, right? So there's a method to the madness. I'm not saying that you take 100% of your money out at those levels, but those are kind of like de-risking levels. And I think as we progress more and more through further cycles, it will all make more sense to treat this more like stocks or penny stocks, you know, where like take the win, man. Because the quote unquote alt season thing, like I bet a lot of you are feeling it right now. It's like, will it ever come? Well, if you're feeling that way now, imagine the next fucking cycle. You're going to be like, will that ever come? You know? So it's a little different now. That's my way of saying, like, keep your eye out for the $1 to $2 zone. I know it's a big range I'm giving you, but that's kind of what you're playing with altcoins. You can see right here, it goes from 82 cents up to almost $2. That's 188. It does that in 2 weeks, you know, almost 3 weeks. These moves happen very, very quick, man. So just keep an open mind on it going that way. Lastly, we're going to be looking at Onyx Coin, because there's something interesting happening here. Remember what I told you before with regards to the breakout on this? And when you look at that breakout is about 3,600%. I think, was it Klima Dow, the first chart that I showed you, that I was entertaining this idea that like if you come back up to these similar levels, you could see just a massive liquidity, like a FOMO top. And that's what we saw in Onyx Coin before. And since it's had an 85% correction, it's also had a major spike up, which is an automatic rally. And recently, I believe we're completing our spring. And now this is the time to buy. So I'm not telling people buy this, but I'm just saying like this type of chart structure where you have your major move to the upside, clearly a buying climax, followed by an 85% correction. Like that's pretty fucked. Then you have this quick rebound. That's your automatic rally. You have your creek, crossing the creek, and then you have your spring, which was tied to this recent event on October 10th. Here you rebound out of it, and then you move into something called the sign of strength, which would be a break higher than the automatic rally. So that move right there alone is about 250%. And then getting back to the prior top is about 580. And then if we are to complete the whole move, getting back to the 1618, which again, that's a big move, but I would entertain at least 7 cents. I would say that's pretty good. We know this thing can move. We know it could do something crazy. So that's something that I would keep in mind too. It's going along with the SCI play that I was talking about last week. I'm kind of bunching them together as possibilities for like last minute purchases for me for my speculative altcoin bag. And we'll see how that goes. I mean, these are things that of course they can go much lower. Of course it could be a bad call in general, but I'm feeling like those particular plays along with a couple others that I'm investigating more into, stuff that could be tied into narratives that'll go along with the Genius Act and Clarity and things that are to come with stablecoin regulations. But I'll be doing more behind the scenes research on that before I share anything, of course. And yeah, this chart setup for me is pretty clean, and I like the way that this all kind of formed. Even though it had this very devastating, huge 80-something% correction, you got to remember it happened after a 3,000% move, almost 4,000% move to the upside. So I slept on this one before. I'm not just gonna get in and I'm not FOMOing. Obviously, I'm literally back at the bottom of the play. So I've been patient since being wrong the last time on this. So we'll see. I'm not jumping the gun in anything. I'll wait till I get some confirmations, see how things develop further. I already have some strong positions built in a lot of other stuff. Doge, I think, also is looking really good. It's pretty much right there where it needs to be compared to where it was in October of prior cycles. We have back here, this was October 2020, it looked like absolute shit, and then it broke out in a straight line. And then of course we have also right over here, this was September, October of 2015. We could get pretty nasty markets, and this would be the most iconic one. I think the one that's most similar to what we're getting now. And I'm going to wrap this one up right here. But if I just hide everything, you're going to see this structure where we had a major breakout. We have this type of crazy correction, and then the pivot finally comes in the month of September. So we had this major move to the upside. We had it dig back down, major correction. If I measure, that was about 70%. If I measure right here, it was of course more because it was the older cycle, 82%. And then it took all the way until November, skyrocketed into a straight line. Also here, January was the start of that parabolic advance. And then of course we had a very nice December last year as well. So I believe that time frame is going to align very nicely for Doge. I'm feeling pretty good with that investment. And I'm going to wrap this one up here. I really appreciate you guys. I hope you enjoyed this follow-up to the What I'm Investing in special. I hope you enjoyed these newer charts that I was sharing with you with this total market cap. This is definitely a really interesting thing we just went through. I'm excited to see how this all plays out over the next couple months. And in general, I'm going to continue to track this along with you guys in written text updates. So you'll be getting one probably 3 or 4 days from now. But for now, enjoy this podcast, and I'll be catching you all very, very soon next week. Appreciate and am grateful for every single one of you. Much love.